Everybody, hope you're doing well. Now, we as students, when we approach the self-pub exam, we think a lot in terms of being a student, but today I'm going to tell you what examiners think, and this is from our personal context with self-pub examiners. There are different ways they approach your speaking, your writing, and we're going to talk about only these two modules because that's where the examiner comes in, not reading and listening. But it's a very specific way they look at it, and they mark you based on this criteria. There are five things, and I added a sixth one as well, just because there are layers to this. I wish I could make a list of 20 things that examiners look for, but we're going to keep it short, at least for this video. Please subscribe because we're going to upload more of these videos about the examiner marking criteria. Okay, so the first thing is the first impression. Remember, this is not a robot or an AI marking your exam. This is a human being. The human characteristics still hold, which means they will be judgmental and it's going to vary. The marks you get are going to vary from examiner to examiner. They are given proper guidelines and they have to act on that. But obviously, every human being thinks differently. So that's why when people give their stuff for reevaluation, they get a different mark because the other human being thought of your writing or speaking in a different way. Okay, and again, we're covering these two modules because this is where most people fail. So because it's a human being, they're going to be looking at your impression, your first impression. So if you start off your speaking with okay, there you go. Or if you delay your speaking or you have a grammar mistake in the very first sentence, it's going to be very hard for you to build credibility for the next few parts. Same thing in writing. If your first sentence is weak, you lose marks right there, and you also will have that impression on the examiner. They will probably think you're not a good enough writer, even if you have written very brilliantly later on. Okay? The opposite also applies. If your first few sentences in writing and speaking are phenomenal, they'll think you are actually very good, and they'll already decide that this person should get a 10 or 11. And if you then screw up later, it might not be as big of an issue, but it could be. We'll talk about that later. But what I'm going to communicate in this point is first impressions are important, and that's why you got to make sure you use the 8-set education templates. Check them out on YouTube and on our blog. Those templates tell you exactly what words and phrases you should use at the start, at the end too, to give the last ending impression also nicely. And by doing that, you would ensure that that human thing, that judgment, that, okay, this is because they decided at the start, this is a good student, this is not a good student, just like employers do in the first 10 to 15 seconds. So you want to make sure you hit that impression nicely. And if you want to find the most advanced version of our templates, you cannot find them on YouTube or on our blog. They're in our course. They are a paid resource, but right now it's on a discount. Check out the course link in the description where you'll find the most advanced usage of templates and how to make a good first impression, especially. Number two is I'm going to cover a lot of things here in terms of speaking because speaking is where most people fail, right? If you have done the self-pub exam, you know this is super true. Using ums and fillers in speaking will also give the examiner the impression that you are a basic or a below average speaker. If you are using those fillers, by fillers I mean of course, so, like those kinds of things, and you say too many times, but the other parts of your speaking are brilliant. Maybe you're using really good words, complex words, and vocabulary. The examiner will already think that you are not a good speaker, even though they will notice, yeah, he is or she is doing good in other parts. But that just saying a few ums or a few fillers will ruin your whole impression. And this is not about first impression. This is now we're talking about later on in the speaking when you keep speaking. So saying these things conveys the message to the examiner that this person is basic, and then they disregard or they don't even focus on all the good stuff you do later on. Maybe your structure is really good, maybe your timing is good, but in their head it's stuck that this is their weakness. It's like a pet peeve, if you are dating and your boyfriend or girlfriend does one thing that you don't like, maybe they make a sound that you don't like. The whole day they do things that you love and they try to please you. You'll be stuck on that one thing that they don't like because that's a pet peeve. That's again the examiners being humans, and that's how they would mark you too. So it's important to understand the psychology. Make sure you don't do ums or fillers in speaking. Talking about good or bad. All right, I wrote this point because when you say words like good or bad in writing or speaking, you lose marks too, because there's some trigger words like good, bad, and so, which are considered extremely basic. Everybody uses them, and if you use them, you would be put in the basic category as well. Okay, instead of good, you should say brilliant. Instead of bad, you should say harmful, detrimental, etc. Right? So instead of so, you should say therefore, hence. By doing basic words, even if your structure overall is better, your grammar is perfect in the rest of the parts, if you have given the examiner a few of these basic words, especially in writing, where you had the chance to proofread and you still didn't fix these words, you will lose marks because the examiner now thinks, again, this person is a basic writer or a speaker. Even if other parts are good, their focus will go on these basic things that you have done. So avoid basic words, especially the most common words people use. Try to use complex and advanced vocabulary. And again, we have lots of vocab lessons right here on this channel and on our blog too. Links are in the description again. Expressions, it's going to be my fifth point. Expressions are important when we come to speaking. Again, this is a difference from, from what the students think and what the examiners look for. Examiners are not looking for just perfect grammar, vocab. Of course, they're important things. They're also looking for your expressions. Can you be expressive, be natural when you're speaking? Or are you going to be like a robot? Are you going to be monotone? This is one thing that is ignored by most candidates, and it's because we're too focused on vocab, complex sentences, which are important, but you want to make sure you are talking like a native speaker, not in terms of accent, but in terms of how you fluctuate your volume when you emphasize the importance of something, and then you have a serious tone, and then you have a better tone at the end, up and down. It should be natural. Examiners are thoroughly looking for that, and candidates are completely ignoring this. This is one thing that candidates just don't understand. It is important. You have to be expressive, okay? So these are the 5 things. And the 6th thing is kind of like a bonus thing because, again, it happens quite frequently. It's the task response. Task response is if you have answered the question correctly, whether writing or speaking. Most candidates think that they're answering questions correctly, but sometimes when they look at the question at the end, when they proofread, or if in speaking they do this, they would realize a lot of times they go off track, especially in the second half of the speaking or the second half of the writing. This is because in the second part or in the later parts of your writing and speaking, you haven't looked at the question for a while. And that's why it's important to not only look at the question or remember the question when you have started your speaking, but also making an outline, making use of your preparation time and making a structure. Like these are the points I'm going to say later on. So if you are okay with that, if you're doing that correctly, you're not going to most likely screw up on task response. But at the same time, your task response versus what the examiner's idea for the task responses could be very different. You know, you might think, for example, you're supporting creation of jobs with the extra surplus you have, right? So you are talking about this in task 2, and you say that creation of jobs is really good for people, livelihood, and families. And you think it's good. But the examiner says, no, I don't understand how is creation of jobs going to help families. You have to explain it to me. You have to say that, well, creation of jobs will lead to more money, which can put food on the table, as well as help families in any necessities like food, shelter, or clothing that they need. Okay, now the examiner's like, that's good. Now I know exactly what will be the help, what you are referring to. So task response is, again, very subjective. But remember, there's a why and how technique. Make sure you ask yourself why, if you're talking about this point, why it would help these people if they have jobs, or how it would help these people if they have jobs. I have made a video on this as well on our channel, the why and how technique, that ensures that you have task response perfectly done. And examiners, even if they are trying to be super critical, because sometimes they just want to find a mistake on your task response, if they're trying to be super critical, they will still have no reason to give you a low mark because you would have good reasoning there. Okay, so I hope these tips help you, and I hope you are able to incorporate them in the exam. Think like an examiner if you want to pass. Don't think like a student, all right? It's not just about good English, it's about the CELPIP techniques most of the times. I hope this video helped out. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk soon.